Sexy boys, sexy girls, Dr. Fragrance here with another fragrance review, and today I'm going to be talking about Jeremy Fragrance's Fragrance.One Fragrance Unisex for everybody. So stay tuned for that, and if you like the content, hit that like and subscribe button. I really do appreciate it. I gotta be honest with you, that spin is actually very hard to nail, and that took me a lot longer than I would like to admit, and I still don't think I quite nailed it. So big props to Jeremy for mastering the spin. Now, as you probably know, Jeremy Fragrance, a very prominent YouTuber, released his own fragrance brand, Fragrance.One, and he originally released a fragrance office composed by Alberto Morales. I guess it did well for him because he also released other fragrances, Date, and as well as now Unisex for everybody. So this one, you know, I'm not the hugest fan of his brand. I don't think they're bad fragrances, but I did want to check this one out, and this one did catch my attention a little bit because it has cinnamon in it, and I do really like cinnamon, so I wanted to see how he would add that, or how Alberto Morales, under his creative direction, would incorporate that cinnamon into what is obviously going to be a mass appealing kind of fragrance. So I did manage to get a decant of this fragrance, and so into the fragrance, what do I actually get with this one? I will say I was very surprised with the opening, although I had heard a little bit about it. I was very surprised because the opening of this fragrance is very similar to Date, which is also compared to Ultramol. And this one just has that very fruity, sweet opening. Now I do also get, as opposed to Date, on this one, I do get a little bit of a very slight powderiness, which also Ultramol has, but I believe that Date doesn't have it. And I'm not a huge fan of powdery notes or powderiness in fragrances. It doesn't really take anything away, but I also find that for me, powderiness doesn't add anything to a fragrance. So I'm always like, well, you know, why is it there? But anyways, so it does have that very lively, fruity opening, very sweet. It is a little synthetic, not in a bad way, so it doesn't smell like bad synthetic, but it doesn't smell, if you think about some fragrances, they have like a photorealistic bergamot or photorealistic juniper berries in the opening of the fragrance. This doesn't really have that. It more has a sweet, almost candy-like accord that has, at least from what I remember from the notes, just bergamot. Find that a little hard to believe. It does come across more like it has more complexity there in the actual citruses that are used. Now I will say the opening is a little bit loud for me. I do find it a little bit shouts a little bit too much, but it's not unpleasant, but it does certainly border on that for me. And along with that loudness goes incredible sillage. So this is one where if I spray it on my hand, moving my hand around, for the first few hours, it's going to be leaving a crazy scent trail. Of course, spray it on your neck or whatever. So during that opening period, it does have very strong sillage, and it has a huge scent trail, very thick. So that, you know, that is a good thing in the sense that you definitely get what you're paying for in terms of performance. But I will get into the longevity and all the performance a little bit later on. You know, as this one starts to dry down, that's when I start to actually pick out the cinnamon. I don't really get it in the opening. And the cinnamon to me is kind of a good and bad thing. So good because I feel like it adds a little bit of depth. It adds a little bit of spice to that fruity, sweet kind of opening, which is really nice. It adds a little bit of character. But the bad thing about it is, in my personal opinion, that's one thing I would have actually amped up a little bit. Just a little bit more cinnamon, because I find that oftentimes the cinnamon is so subtle that you don't even actually pick it up at all. And so that is one thing where I think the fragrance kind of misses what it's doing, or it would add more, in my opinion. So it is nice. It's nice when it's there, but it's not something that is always detectable. Now I do get a slight like floralness too, only very slight. And this is one thing that pulls it a little bit more, I guess, feminine rather than masculine. But it is still something that to me is, you know, I think it's a unisex fragrance as it describes. Now, the other thing I'll say about this, the dry down, it changes a lot. So I actually was quite impressed because it's not actually a very linear fragrance. There is a very similar vibe in the opening and mid, but in the dry down, this changes a lot. So there is still some slight bit of that fruity accord, that sweetness, but then that elemi starts coming out and it's a lot more resinous, a lot more thick, and a lot more sweet. Well, actually, it's not more sweet. I should say it's less sweet, but it's thicker, more robust, more resinous, and it has a totally different vibe. Still has that a slight bit of that fruity sweetness that's in the opening, but it changes completely. So it's a totally different fragrance in the dry down, in my opinion, and to my nose. And I do actually like the dry down. It was a pleasant surprise. And I think the first time I really noticed it, I had sprayed it on later in the evening, and I ended up going to sleep, and I woke up and I was smelling something on my hand, and I was like, what is that? It smells nice, but what is it? I don't even know. And then I realized that it was actually unisex because it had changed that much that it was virtually indistinguishable. Now there is slight hints, as I mentioned, of that fruity DNA that you get in the opening, but it's really toned down, and you get a much more resinous, thick, classy kind of a fragrance. So, it is an enjoyable fragrance. It does smell nice. I have some certain criticisms, I would say, or as I pointed out, about the actual composition of the fragrance, but it is pleasant enough. And I will also say that this is probably my favorite of the Fragrance.One line. With Office, to me, I did actually get a good amount of the iris in the opening and the mid. I know it had like orris root or whatever, which does have an irisy type of quality, and I did definitely pick that up. And to me, that's one of the things that really distinguished it from other blue fragrances, made it its own thing. It definitely had a totally different kind of vibe there. And so I could appreciate that. I could appreciate that it was a blue fragrance, but different. Wasn't a huge fan of Date, but I do like this one, and I do like the cinnamon, and I really like the dry down. The dry down is by far the best part in my personal opinion. Now, the performance on this is actually really good as well. So this one, I'd say you get projection in that 2 to 3 hour period, and a lot of sillage as well. So this one is going to leave a scent trail. It's going to leave a scent trail that you yourself will probably even be able to smell, which I find to be rarer and rarer in fragrances these days. Often is the case that you go completely nose blind. So when there is something that can be at times almost overwhelming because the sillage is so thick, it is, it's a bit of a surprise. So this one does perform in that category. Longevity, I do get around 8 hours, which is nothing to shake a fist at. I think that, ultimately, whatever you're doing when you go out or whenever you put this on, you're going to be done doing that by the time this wears off. So it will last, and the performance is there. So I think that's nicely done as well. So I know everyone complains about the pricing of this fragrance, of Jeremy's fragrances, and ultimately, I would agree. I will probably say this again at some point. I think the price point for these fragrances should be in the $140 range for the, for the YouTuber fragrances. Jeremy's, as they are a lot more designerish, and given his fan base, I think they should be a little bit cheaper than that. But often he has sales. I just like that 140 price point a lot, because if you watch the channel, I'm a huge fan of Kerosene, and he actually used to be a YouTuber, believe it or not, the guy from Kerosene. He stopped making videos when he started his own brand, and of course, you get 100 ml for $140, and I think for a niche fragrance, it's actually a very fair, very good price. Now, the Fragrance.One is more of a niche brand. It only really does fragrance, so that does make it niche. But they are very designer smelling fragrances because they're designed to be very mass appealing. Now, of course, there are a lot of niche fragrances that are mass appealing and designerish. So, whatever, he can charge whatever he wants. It's his business. As for the people who complain or say it's, priced too high for what it is, I would agree with that. But there are often bundles or buy one, get one free or whatever. And, you should probably, if you really want this, you should probably wait until that. But it is worth sampling. You might like it as an easy to wear, everyday, easy reach kind of a fragrance. And I think that's really what it does well, and I think that's the way he's designed it. It is something I could see wearing more or less any occasion, any time. Could wear this one dressed up a little bit. I mean, for me personally, and being that it is a little bit more versatile, it's not going to be the best at any situation, but I could wear this. I could see wearing this dressed up. I could see it as a night out, but I could also wear it fairly casually. It is just a fairly easy to wear fragrance. With that, I would say I probably personally would only really wear it in the fall winter because it is fairly sweet and does become a little bit more resinous in the dry down. It does have some light freshness in the opening, so maybe spring it would be okay. It really depends on the weather. I'm not a big fan of wearing really sweet fragrances in the heat. I know some people do it, but ever since I first got Spice Bomb Extreme and I wore it in like the blazing heat, like 30 degrees Celsius, and nearly choked myself out with the fragrance, I've been a little bit more, I guess, in tune with weather when it comes to my fragrance choices. So this one, very versatile, although better for the cooler or colder months, in my opinion. And it is a fairly unisex fragrance. There's nothing in this fragrance that, to me, really says it's masculine or feminine either way. I think it's just a very easy to wear, enjoyable, likable fragrance. Some people might find it a little bit strong, but you can always go less on the sprays. Anyways, guys, that's the video. I'm going to cut it there. Have you tried anything from Fragrance.One? You know, I'd actually be interested in finding out what the deodorant performs like, what it actually wears like. It would be interesting to hear your thoughts on that, or if you've tried Date or Unisex or Office. Let me know in the comment down below. And as always, don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video.